to Adventure Party for the first week of October 2024. This week, sadly, the spell Cull has to be culled. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way.
Smoking jacket room. The blood-curdling screams wafting in through the French doors as we stoke our pipes, settle into our wing-back leather-bound chairs, gaze upon the tomes and tomes and tomes of spells we've culled. But will we cull anymore?
Are we actually in it?
Well, we were until. Do you know what? It's been a pleasure, Warlord Scar, but really sometimes you just stick your battle axe in where it's not wanted. Welcome back, folks. It's another spell cull. Wouldn't you say so?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, and I've got bad news, especially for a warmonger like yourself who does love the splitting of skulls and the spelling of culls. No, reverse that, the other way around. Well, folks, if you're even moderately interested in D&D, then you've probably noticed a couple of things have happened since the last episode. They've dropped the PHB on us, the Player's Handbook. And by Player's Handbook, I mean half of this is spells book. And because D&D works differently now, quite hard to find the original versions of some of these spells. I mean, by original, I mean the 5th ed versions. We can always refer to books. But we're in the era of D&D 2024 5th ed. Don't look too closely at the changes, question mark. Please buy our VTT, question mark.
Yeah, it's not a new edition, but you should definitely buy the new book.
Yeah, what, $180 for?
Yeah, that's normal.
$80.
Well, I mean, it's every 10 years, right? So it'll be fine.
Okay, you've got me there. We are a miserly lot.
I mean, how many Space Marines can you buy for that? Like 3? 7?
Yeah, go spend some money on a PDF for your favorite role-playing system, preferably one by a third party. Because guess who doesn't release PDFs? Oh yeah, that's right. The people who make the core
You
game.
get a PDF. You just need to sign up for a 57-year D&D Beyond subscription, and promise your soul to Vecna.
No, you get online access to the thing they might change. Okay, you know what? We could do this ad infinitum.
I feel like we already have at least twice.
Probably have, yeah. Okay, fair. Smoking jackets on, boys. It is, of course, hold on, I get the effect ready. Probably the last time we'll use this. Spell call.
This time, I think we're going to try to summarize our thoughts on the list of spells that we were working on, which is the original 2014 list. But if we thought that they were going to fix these in the new edition, we would never even start this. If they were going to realize their mistakes, we would not be needed.
I mean, yes and no. It's not all bad, but it is. Look, we could be accused of being wildly ambitious when it comes to multi-part series. See our Battle Royale of RPG systems, see our Tomes of Gygax series covering the original Dungeon Master's Guide. And we thought, hey, I mean, how long will it really take us to get through all the spells in the 5th ed PHP?
Took a while.
Took a long time. Took almost as long as that pause. And we got to what? The D's? The E's?
E's. We finished up E.
So instead of trying to kind of fight the tide, I mean, we'd essentially have to start again. And there's no telling. We might not get through all the 2024 spells before the edition flipped over. So instead, we've decided to pull the plug on this series and end with the 5 spells that each of us would like to cull. No, not rewrite, not equivocate about, not wish for a better world, but just gone from the game forever. So we both compiled a list of 5, which we figured was as good a number as any. And we're going to present them here and maybe have a little talk about some of the other things we've noticed along the way, or just keep ragging on our favorite game. So we posted our choices earlier. We've each seen them. There are no overlaps, amazingly.
I will start by putting my cards on the table, take a big, big culling stick, pointing it at the staple of staples of the spell list. I want to get rid of Fireball.
Shock horror.
Fireball has always been this weird mix of really good AoE spell that keeps getting used as a mediocre direct damage spell because it's always just useful enough that rather than spend any of your spell slots on any interesting or unique damaging spells, no vampiric touches, sleet storms, whatever the second level acid arrow. Instead of doing all that, you just prep a load of fireballs and you fireball everything. And you heavily encourage your party members to bring up rings of fire resistance so that they can resist your fireballs because it's so much more efficient to just fireball the room than to actually put any work into adjusting your spell selection for the situation. And for 5th edition, they decided to lean into this rather than address it and made Fireball do even more damage than it used to do at base, resulting in Fireball now doing more damage than most 5th level damaging spells and ensuring a cavalcade of barbarians being killed by their own wizards and memes for days. And I just think it's the ultimate proof that some spells are just too good and they make the game worse by the fact that they are so good.
Well, it is a value add. You have to make a very strong argument as a D&D player, as a wizard. When you hit that, what was it, level 5, you get access to 3rd level spells. Why aren't you taking Fireball?
Yeah.
And it is an awkward, it almost get cornered by basically everyone else in your group, whether they be magic users or not, and go, well, why aren't you taking Fireball? My answer to that is usually because I'm taking haste. Do you like attacking twice?
Okay, yeah. Like in a given party, you'll often find that, for example, if you're in a very melee heavy party, that haste will be the better option mathematically, but it will not have the
shock and awe.
Yeah, the shock and awe. The deal with this many enemies in one go element of.
But that's fine. I'm talking to people who play martial characters. I just need to use small words and impress them with more attacks good, right?
Yeah.
And then they leave me alone to cast other spells. And they're not.
But yeah, there's loads of really cool 3rd level spells. Flying.
Oh, 3rd level's where all the good stuff is. But yes, okay, you're getting no pushback from me, Warlord, because we've long hinted at the fact that neither of us particularly like Fireball. It is undercosted. It is oversubscribed. It is the.
It despite the stuff being effective the spell, it definitely sucks all the oxygen out of the spell list.
It should get you kicked out of most towns for casting it. But as like as not, published adventures aren't just throwing fireballs around, but they're usually handing out necklaces of fireball as well.
Mm.
It comes up, you get one very early on in Dragon Heist, for example, and I'm pretty sure it shows up in a few other places as well. A necklace of fireballs is a wild piece of kit. Even if you don't like fireball, a necklace of fireball is worth having. But let's kick off here answer to every encounter. Investigation, diplomacy, doesn't matter. Fireball it. Traps in front of you, fireball. It's a bit of or do we not like it because of what it tells us about ourselves as players? Is it the Rorschach test of spells?
In a sense, it is like, for a lot of situations, it is the obviously optimal solution. And I dislike obviously optimal solutions in most situations. And I dislike the fact that there's a spell that if you don't take, someone is going to complain about you not taking it because you're not playing the game properly. And in a mature setup with reasonable people, you can tell those people to go flip themselves as you wish. But like it's still that nagging tension of if we needed raw DPS here, or spread around AoE damage, then there is literally only one quarter call. And it never really becomes obsolete, which is not never becoming obsolete to the point where I think they recommend that like Eldritch Knights take Fireball, but they don't get third level spells like level 11 when the wizard's getting sixth level spells. And
Oh boy, don't tell me things like that. I'm trying to rebuild a Blade Singer in 2024 edition. It's not going very well.
I'm sure you're 1 to 2 books of complete elves away from just breaking the game. Don't worry about it.
Yes. Someone's guide to something. That'll get me my Blade Singer back. Yeah, so there it is. Like I think we've said almost everything we can say about it.
Well, I've put my first kill up on the tally board. What about you?
I'm going to give you its poor country cousin. First on my list, but not the one I most want to ban, or cull in this case, is something very similar. Third level spell. I think it's an evocation as well. It does exactly the same amount of damage to anyone it hits with the same saving throw, which I believe is Dex. But for my money, it's just so bad compared to Fireball, despite being so similar. And that is Lightning Bolt, which of course heads out in a 100-foot long line to a target you can see and inflicts the same, was it 68 lightning damage against anything it hits in a straight line. I think anyone who's ever actually stood on anything other than a completely spherical battlefield will get why this is a problem. Yeah, it's exactly the same. You can upcast it for extra damage. It's same level. It takes up the same slot as Fireball, and in many ways identical. Also, inexplicably sets things on fire like Fireball. I mean, heaven forfend we write some additional mechanics here to give it its own flavor. Fireball set thing on fire. Lightning bolt set thing on fire. Oh, okay. The copy and paste is strong with this one. It's just a worse Fireball. I didn't sit down and work it out, but I'm pretty sure it covers less squares than Fireball because Fireball's 20-foot radius
Yeah.
covers an awful lot of squares, and you're much more likely to be fighting areas of people rather than lines of people.
Okay. Well, as someone who's recently been running a little bit of OSR dungeon, there are in classic Gygaxian dungeons. There were a lot more times that you would have
100-foot of corridor.
yeah, just so that there was enough space between rooms for all the secret rooms and such like.
And this is where the fight is going to migrate to, this 100-foot corridor.
I mean, and I guess the theory is that if you are armed with lightning bolts and not fireballs, that you would tend to try bottleneck tactics rather than, getting them all to spread out in a room and just grenade the place. But I'm curious as to why this is a cull and not a rewrite situation. I mean, okay, obviously we promised we weren't
We're not
going to
here
do
to
anything.
rewrite. We're not because it's just it's impractical. It lacks any flavor, despite the fact that a lightning bolt is at least as thematic and evocative and embedded in the genre of fiction as a fireball. But it just doesn't like lightning bolt's responsible for so many cool things, turning people to the dark side, getting Marty McFly back to 1985, being the Highlander. But this spell is underwritten. It doesn't come with anything special. It doesn't impart stun or do something else cool. Like it doesn't do anything cool if you cast it near bodies of water. It go like the straight if it arced between like, chain lightning do that.
Yeah, chain light. Like I understand. Like getting rid of lightning bolt might seem like a big thing, but we still have chain lightning. So even if were to strip out lightning bolt, we would still have chain lightning, which would sounds like it does more of the kind of thing you do. Because it arcs, it spreads
Yes,
stuff
you
around.
can direct it around the place. It zaps between people. It's just better. I'm just going to look it up now very quickly just to remind myself why chain lightning's better. And that's if lightning bolt is if fireball is the hammer, then lightning bolt is the scalpel that you could weave between, or it should be, but it isn't.
Yeah, but that's sort of the things that Gygax, in his utter glee at giving people overpowered spells and then having them hoist boom petard, he was a big fan of using Fireball in enclosed spaces would cause backdraft. And a similar trick for Lightning Bolt was that if you cast it in too short a corridor, that it would bounce back and hit you in the face. You can sort of blame Gygax's predilection for figuring out new and interesting ways to punish his players for why we have two different spells.
So maybe it was written differently in the past, but the way it's written at the moment, Chain Lightning, 3 bolts leap from that target to as many as 3 other targets. So it's not like you get to kind of run a line between a whole bunch of them, but you do get to target someone and have it jump to other targets within 30 feet of the first target. So it's quite selective. It's nuanced. It's selective. It's everything that Lightning Bolt should be, but it's 3 levels higher at 6th. Does a hell of a lot. Does 10d8 damage. It's a lot of damage.
If we had time to fully rewrite, I would probably rewrite Lightning Bolt to work like Chain Lightning and be scaling. But then again, as I said, if we were doing that, we would be rewriting the entire spell system, and we do not have time for that.
No, so we should move on to your second choice.
Sure. So I would like to talk about the other overpowered spell that everyone takes, and I can't stand hearing discussions of it. Although this might be a little less fair, because a lot of the reason I hear about it is because I go to a lot of OSR blogs and other places where people will really, really harp on about, because you're a real wizard, you only have one spell per day, you must totally maximize the effectiveness of your one spell per day, and therefore there's really only one choice, and that is sleep. And I don't like the way sleep changes the game. Because what you have here is you have, at first level, we have an AoE save or die spell, essentially. As you pointed at a bunch of kobolds or goblins, whatever, they all fall over, and then you have to have the can paladin stab people in the throat conversation.
While they're asleep. Yeah.
Like, if you compare that to the other, let's say, call them non-lethal or save or die knockout spells, like, what level would you say those are? Like, I don't even know how many, like, hold person is, I guess, second level.
Save or die, knockout spells, hypnotic pattern.
Yeah, that's like level 4, level 5, isn't it?
It's beefy. I'm not sure what level it's at, but it's certainly super effective.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it destroy many a con scenario. But, like, why are we allowing this one first level spell to do similar work at scale to that at first level when it's usually incredibly restrictive in the magic could affect it?
Like you see it a lot in optimization threads for those who can take it. It's like low level. It's super effective.
And here's the other problem: its effectiveness drops off really quickly.
It really does. Yeah.
It starts off as like D4 plus 10 hit points worth of people or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like another 5 for every. If you upcast it, it's like an additional.
Now, what I'd say about that, and hey, Warlord, respect your choice. Sleeps out, sleeps out. Night, night. But it is a good object lesson for spellcasters in why it's important to review your prepared spells as you level up. Like it is super effective early on and then very rapidly drops off, which is a good way of telling people are playing the game. A, check what you're loading up every morning. B, one of your main reasons for existing is finding other spells. So go out and find them. They're in other people's spell books. Your XP is, in that goblin. Your spells are in that rival wizard. And they might have better stuff than you. So go get it, champ. But yeah, like it can do a lot of damage early on. Especially if you find yourself in the company of paladins who, well, they took the course, but they're not necessarily restricted by minor things like that.
I don't think I would really have that much problem with like they just made it a weaker version of Hold Person where you pointed at someone and they make a will save, or they fall asleep for a minute or something. I don't think I or anyone else complain about that, but instead they've kept on this road, presumably inspired by many first edition Grognard waxing lyrical about the time. There, they said my one hit point wizard was useless at the party, but then I took out 12 kobolds with a single spell. And I don't know, I I just don't like that play pattern. I don't like this idea where we're making people do these big grand plays as opposed to, being smart with the tools that you have, which have their own usefulness, as opposed to waiting and waiting and waiting until you find that nest of goblins or whatever, and then making the paladin ask some personal questions.
Paladins, not a deeply reflective people, as I'm sure you're aware. They're slitting throats before you can finish the incantation.
We'll move on to you yourself.
Okay, this one isn't going to be front and center for a lot of people. It's a long spell, it's about half a page in the book, and you've probably never seen it cast. You may not have even encountered it that often. It's a spell called Guides and Wards.
Are those guards and wards?
What did I write? Oh yeah, guards and wards. And it's a bit of a tricky one, but I put it here as a way of representing what I would consider an entire class of spell. And that's the spells in the player's handbook that really should be NPC spells and not player spells at all.
Yeah. The spells that are trying to preserve the illusion that you too can one day build your own dungeon by casting a whole bunch of spells, and then you'll be a master of a dungeon.
Well, this one is tailored for the master of a dungeon. So, Guards and Wards is you create it's a 6-level abjuration. It's got a casting time of 10 minutes and a duration of 24 hours. But the duration, we'll come back to that. So you create a ward that protects up to 2,500 square feet of floor space, an area of 50 feet square, or 100 5-foot squares, or 25 10-foot squares. Okay. The warded area can be up to 20 feet tall and shaped as you desire. You can ward several stories of a stronghold by dividing the area among them, as long as you can walk into each contiguous area while you are casting the spell. When you cast a spell, you can specify individuals that are unaffected by any or all the effects that you choose. You can also specify a password that, when spoken aloud, makes the speaker immune to these effects. And the effects are corridors are filled with fog, doors are magically locked, stairs are filled with webs, and then you get to choose a couple other things, such as stinking clouds or suggestion to take effect in this area. And now, the whole warded area radiates magic. Spell magic cast on a specific effect, if successful, removes only that effect. And you can create a permanently guarded and warded structure by casting the spell there every day for 1 year.
I've never seen this spell in any dungeon ever.
Ever. No, I mean, you would imagine that a spell this effective, only 6th level, the components are minuscule, amounting to a handful of common items like string, a small amount of Umbra blood. Perhaps that's a little hard to come by. Small silver rod worth 10 gold pieces, but it ain't nothing much. You're effective, like player characters are casting much more expensive spells every day of the week. Yeah, this should be everywhere. It is the password protected area spell.
But it's not fun to have to go through.
It's hell to have to go through. Unlike many other spells, you can only dispel bits of it. And it's in the player's handbook as if someday you're going to cast this, because you're going to settle down into a lump of real estate that needs to be this heavily warded. I mean, if I was in a PvP game of D&D, maybe I'd see some utility for this. It's like if I was playing Rust D&D, I'd want this. I'd like this would be the most popular spell on the server.
Yeah.
And maybe is there, like, you familiar with Sword Art Online?
Vaguely, by reputation.
That's a very popular anime around PvP, sort of D&D style PvP online multiplayer isekai thing. Like, this is rock, but in a game of D&D, the way we generally understand to be played, what the hell is this for? As you say, it's never been applied to. I'm pretty sure it's never been applied to a published dungeon.
Yeah, no, I've never seen one. I've been going through a whole bunch of old published dungeons. The kind of place you would expect this kind of thing to go on. And I've never seen anything where all of the corridors are foggy and all of the doors are locked and all of the doorways have webs in them. And even the most deadly dungeon I looked up never has that level of absolute nonsense on every surface.
I mean, Gary Gygax could have written this spell. So I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper just for a second. Corridors, fog-filled, making heavily obscured. In addition, at each intersection or branching passage, offering a choice of directions, there's a 50% chance the creature other than you will believe it is going the opposite direction from one it chooses. Doors, as I've said, magically warded as the arcane lock spell. In addition, you can cover up to 10 doors with an illusion equivalent to minor illusion to make them appear as plain sections of wall. So you're wandering down the foggy dungeon trying to spot illusion-covered doors. And the strands of web in the stairways recover after 10 minutes if they're burned or torn away. So your escape route is being blocked behind you. Yeah, it's just like this is who hurt you, Dungeon Master? Why did you do this?
I don't think anyone hurt them enough. So someone wrote it out of obligation, and then no one ever cast it or used it in any way.
It's a wild spell, right? Like, okay, imagine go either side of that line. You're behind the GM screen, and you decide to drop this. And remember, the stronghold is also filled with people who this isn't affecting, and your players are trying to get in there. Maybe you just don't want to run the game anymore. Maybe but it's the passive aggressive way of getting your entire party to quit. You're a player, and you encounter this. It's like, okay, even with planning, I now have to devote every single slot to. I know we're way over time. Every single spell slot is now got to be devoted to dispel magic. Yeah, okay. I think we're get this stuff out of here.
We've already explained there needs to be a system for ritual spells. They had one in 4th ed, but then people were angry at 4th ed, so they took the good ideas out. We've done this dance a few times. Anyway, moving on. I also have a category of spells I'd like to take a shotgun to, and the poster boy for this one is the classic thing. Every edition of the game always had that cool name attached to it. Never proved its worth. Tensor's Floating Disc.
A named spell, a spell for a named character. My goodness, we're culling deep here.
Like, the first thing anyone's going to ask is like, who the hell is Tensor? And what does this cool disc do? And it's like it carries things for you.
It's a great name. I mean, I'm sure you've seen those TikToks and
it's a game with the spell that doesn't deserve, because it immediately makes you think you're some kind of Zinchian sorcerer surfing along the astral winds on top of thing. But like the spell explicitly says you cannot do that. Do not even try.
It's terrible.
The only time a person can go on the disc is if they are a corpse that needs to be brought back to town for a resurrection.
Yeah, I mean, just stick him on the back of the mule, or failing that, the barbarian. Tensor, of course, in the real world is a unique structure that is some sort of active suspension. Have you seen those?
That's a tensor.
A tensor, yeah. I mean, it's a variation on the word, but it looks they're those structures that look like they're floating due to the non-intuitive way that
the weight distribution is. Yeah,
suspension and weight distribution works. You can build one yourself from Lego. I've done it. It's great fun.
Yeah. Whereas a tensor is, I believe, an anagram of Ernest.
Oh, very good.
Because it's the character of Ernest Gygax, or the eldest son, I believe, and one of the first people who were subjected to the final cut of a D&D by Gygax.
The floating disc is a utility spell that has no particularly good utility.
Yeah.
It can carry a lot of weight. It can carry it behind you, but it's like mules, it doesn't do stairs. It won't do changes in elevation above exceeding 10 feet. It's just a picky, choosy, obstinate spell that is available very early on, and no one ever takes it because you're just better off sticking it in a backpack.
Yeah. I know there's the OSR argument of, you have to track every pound of coins that you bring, and the floating disc is great for carrying treasure chests you don't want to open.
No, it's not. If the first 10-foot pit I have to cross, it fails. It won't do it. So now what? Tensor's magical catapult to throw the coins over onto the next disc I cast? Right, I'm down 3 spell slots now.
I think Morton Keenan made a magnificent mule spell in some edition. That might be more useful.
Bag of holding is more useful.
Yeah.
I can just throw the bag of holding across the pit and then go after it and jump the 10 feet.
it's just a cool sounding spell that immediately makes you think of all kinds of useful things it could do, and then it doesn't do any of them because they're afraid of making it too flexible. Another spell I think about this is Mage Hand, where they have for years refused to let Mage Hand actually be used to, pick up a sharp object and poke a guy with it. It's refused. It
In
has to
fairness,
be.
that's like the least useful thing you could do with Mage Hand. Its applications I've found are many and varied in the right kind of hands and the wrong kind of mind. But I take your point. It's things you would expect to be able to do with Mage Hand. You can't do. Tensor's floating disk is even worse. And it has all the hallmarks of something that was returned to again and again and chipped away at as problematic use cases sort of arose, where whoever's writing these things went, oh, ran a campaign and this was totally abused. And we're gonna carve out this exception. It doesn't work under these circumstances. And they come back 10 years later and they do the same again. Oh, no, we can't have it going up too fast because then they get, it's just, no, you're right. Get rid of it. It's a horrible spell. It promises so much and then it's a kind of a cul-de-sac spell, which the game has managed to shed a fair few of, but there's these spells like just don't take. Until exactly this year, True Strike would have been on that list.
Yeah.
Like this doesn't work the way you think it's going to work.
Yep.
Right, so tense is gone. Okay, so I'll move on to my number third, Clairvoyance. Now, this one isn't actually my choice. It is at the behest of Mr. E, who is the guy who runs our Discord server. Come visit our Discord server, where the party goes on after hours. You can find a link in the show notes, and you can join in the discussion on so many different topics. But how many people are on our Discord? I've never thought to look. Quite a few now. And some of them happen to know are RPG writers, contributors, playtesters. Lots is a varied bunch. You're going to be in good company.
Yeah.
Join our Discord. So Clairvoyance was flagged, and I'm very much in agreement with Mystery on this one. It's a class of spell that basically brings the game to a shuddering halt and forces the GM to play kind of monkey's paw, devil lawyer games with questions and answers. The funniest example of this has got to be from the D&D movie, where they resurrect a bunch of people and ask the questions. And that's great because they appear to have any number of castings of Speak with Dead. But when you get to Clairvoyance, which is an observation spell, or things like, what's the one where you ask the gods questions?
Augury?
Yeah, things like that. They all tend to go the same way. The GM has to hum and haw over how they might give you a truthful answer that doesn't reveal too much, or they just give up, they just open the book to the relevant page and just start reading, which kind of kills it. There's a Clairvoyance in particular has a couple of caveats that, a bit like Tensor's Floating Disk, this has been written to be obstructive. Just pull it out here. Do you know Clairvoyance by heart? Is that one you'd put in your...
I've never been in the party with the particular kind of information vampires who really like casting it.
It's either very abusable or very useless, depending on the mood of your GM, which is not a great place to be in because you'd like to be able to pick up I mean, Fireball has its naysayers, but at least everyone knows where they stand with it. Now, Clairvoyance, however, a slightly different beast. It's one of those spells you kind of have to check in and see, well, is it going to work the way I think it's going to work? It's third level, casting time of 10 minutes, and duration, concentration, up to 10 minutes. Okay. 100 gold. My goodness. Information is not cheap. So you create an invisible sensor within range, and the range is a mile, in a location familiar to you. So you have to have been there already. So it's not... First off, the Clairvoyance, unlike the definition of the word, is not somewhere that allows you to see anywhere. You've got to have been there already or be familiar with it. Or is in an obvious location that's unfamiliar to you, such as behind a door, around a corner, or in a grove of trees. Presumably this corner is not a mile away. The sensor remains in place for the duration, and it can't be attacked or otherwise interacted with. Fine. So when you cast a spell, you choose seeing or hearing. And this is where the obstructive GM has a field day, because If you can see, they'll be like, okay, well, the two people you're interested in are a person you know and somebody you don't know walk into a room and they're talking. One of them has their back to you. The other guy, you can see him. Can you read lips? No. Okay, well then you know they're in that room and then they left. Great, 10 minutes are up. Let's go. Or hearing. Rustlings of paper, interruptions, sound of someone vomiting. Like you may or may not get anything from that. Or they may choose to speak obliquely for some reason, and you get very little information.
These are spells. This kind of, let's say magical scouting spells, we'll call them. And then there's divination element. These kinds of spells were designed in a very different environment. They were designed for plotless dungeons, where this was a how do we safely scout the next room to figure out if the dragon is there or if it's just three kobolds. That was the type of thing that this kind of spell was intended for. But these spells could not adapt to the growing story-based gaming that became popular in first and second ed and on so on since. And now any GM who has a value in his plot and wants people to be, a GM who values pacing in storytelling is heavily incentivized to look unfavorably on these kind of spells and try to hamper their effectiveness, as you've described, because they're trying to make sure that the game feels good to play. But the player isn't the thing of like, I don't know that the emotional impact will be better if I do it this way rather than this way. So obviously I should do it this way because. And then you have the efficiency players saying, even if it would be better story, we should still work more efficiently and with better personal safety because that's what professionals do. Blah 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 blah. And they just never they basically found the designers of the game found themselves in a corner where these were iconic spells from the very first edition of the game, so they felt they couldn't take them out, but they didn't really fit in the paradigm that we're used to. They were designed for let's just not send the thief into the dragon's treasure and get killed. Let's use a spell instead. That style of play is barely around anymore, except in OSR games and stuff. But in D&D mainstream, it's gone, and therefore the reason to have the spells is in the way that they are is also gone, or it requires heavy modification. But they have to keep the spells in because they were in the original DMG and they're iconic, etc., etc., etc. That's my take.
Yeah. Wait 2 more spell levels and you get scrying, which is just infinitely more useful and works the way that you would imagine Clairvoyance would work. You can see in here at the same time, it ranges a creature you're familiar with that is on the same plane of existence to you. So yeah, that's Clairvoyance and its ilk. I would anything that makes the GM have to do mental gymnastics between what they know and delivering an honest answer. Augury and things like that are in there as well.
Yeah, these are not things that are easy. They're spells that require you to ask what type of game are you running, which is actually an awful lot of mental load to put on a particularly new GM. And these kind of spells tend to be surprises where like, oh wait, like so mysteries don't happen in this universe because anyone can just clairvoyance or ask a god for advice on the problems. And this is where the problems start to pile up. Okay. I have another class of spells which I could pick any number of versions of, but I decided to go for the lowest level version of it, which is Rope Trick.
Interesting. This is the one on your list that really made me go, wait, what? Huh. Go on.
This is the perfect immunity for a game mechanic spell
Ah.
because they felt that players needed a way to say no. We get a short rest, and it just snaps snaps. I say vermicillin. It just makes the setting seem crazy because this is a second level spell, a third level. This is the kind of person, a kind of apprentice wizard that barely knows how to magic their shoelaces, and yet they can, with a few minutes prep time, create an invincible fortress box in the middle of the sky that basically nothing in the monster manual can deal with.
Yeah. It's it's kind of insane. Rangers can take this.
Yeah.
Like a lot of classes can get this.
There's a bevy of these things. There's Lehman's Tiny Hut, Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, and they're all doing this thing of like it's a statement of we do not want players to ever lose the argument over whether they can get the rests in. Like where we're giving the player party
All the warlocks are loving you.
giving the player party a whole set of tools at multiple spell levels so that they can say, no, GM, we do get a rest. We do get our spell back. We do charge out of this rope trick, barbarian first with full hit points and a whole bunch of buff spells cast. And there's anything in the monster manual can do about it.
I mean, they can go up there after them. I wouldn't want to get stuck in the very small extra dimensional space that Rope Trick creates with, say, a Bargalar. Is that it? The big ape demon thing? Or a Barghast, for that matter.
Or most barbarians, to be honest.
Or most barbarians, yeah. Anything beginning with B, really.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying it's a pleasant experience for anyone involved, but it's very difficult unless you are putting in rules for hardship. Yeah, squeeze into a tiny little box room with all of your sweatiest companions for an hour. Please try to get a short rest in that situation. If you're going to say like sacrifice fatigue from foot smell or whatever,
yeah, you're using Rope Trick, but you're also talking about Tiny Hut and what's the Iron Fortress. That's a magic item, actually.
Yeah, but that kind of thing,
which can be used to great effect. That's a thrown weapon.
It's just that they seem so mechanical because
It is quite silly. And it's quite video game silly. Yeah, sure, I can just set up camp here in the middle of Death Swamp, get my feet dry, have a little snacky snack. The warlocks napping in the corner, getting back their... What do warlocks get back at short rest?
Basically spells. They're called something else, invocation or something.
Yeah, it is quite... It's a very video gamey spell. It is rooted in fairy tale. It has that going for it because the rope trick is this classic kind of Arabian Nights-esque.
Yeah, I believe it was either Indian street magic or Arabians talking about Indian street magic because the Arabians, for some reason, really thought that India was the real place. I think Aladdin was actually originally set in India because it was the cooler place to set than in the middle of Arabia.
Somewhere on the Silk Road. It's never been fully nailed down, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's okay. So we also have. I mean, if you want to bury this thing, you can strap on the stench of Orientalism. But now I have to say, I've got a personal attachment to Rope Trick. It has saved my life because it's not the spell you think of as being sort of one to cast in combat, but on occasion when the chips are absolutely down, because there's no I don't think there's any minimum distance stipulated for the rope, which is very useful if you're, say, flat on your back and about to die. You can rope trick up about 6 inches and crawl into a safe space before you lose your last hit, which I've done. My GM was very generous. In fairness, he did say, until you did that, I had no idea how you're going to live through that encounter. It was the Underdark. It was a good time. But yeah, as a class of spells, yes, absolutely. Those impenetrable barriers, those uncrossable thresholds.
I mean, it would have been slightly better in the likes of Third Ed, where every monster had like 5 paragraphs of special abilities and spell-like effects they could pull out of their behinds for no reason, where like every demon could cast darkness and angel could cast 3 types of shape change. Or in those days, it might be more, except what I saw before, a foe to have some response to these kinds of spells. But in the modern parlance, GMs are often just left completely flabbergasted. It's like, okay, so apparently in this universe, there exists perfect timeout magic, and no one can do anything about it unless they are, a set of wizards or something with spell magic or something.
And at the lowest levels, you can get this really early.
Yeah.
And the other versions just get better.
Hmm.
They're even more formidable. Okay, so that's Rope Trick. I have to say it was a surprise, but your reasoning is sound, Warlord. Your conversational tactics always win out. So, My second to last pick, one I've railed against, one I think we did an episode on, if I'm not mistaken, is, no one would be surprised by this one, Counterspell. The it didn't happen school of magic. There are other counterspells are available. You can blame Magic the Gathering for that. But Counterspell for me is, and I understand why it exists. I understand there's, in the game of Rocket Tag, every so often you want to get a do-over. But it's a spell that stops things from happening. And for my money, things not happening, it's just dead time in a game. Even in the small increments of a round of combat, you're just going, I'm going to spend all of my time making sure that your time doesn't matter. And that doesn't sit too well with me, so it's on my list. I will allow you to make a firm and frank rebuttal. You can tell me I'm wrong, or we can move on.
Well, as I said, we have a full episode on this. In the time since, it's actually that episode's probably a year old at this point.
At least. I'm going to look it up.
My thoughts on the matter are, like, there's a deeper debate here about whether it's better to take damage and heal it back or to avoid damage in the first place. And that's an RPG style thing that I don't think D&D can answer properly because it's too big. It has, if you're going to commit to the whole, we have hit points, we swing our swords for damage, it is probably better for effects to happen and then be cancelled by, let's say, a dispel magic, or remove curse or whatever, or give a fighter a chance to have a saving throw every turn or whatever. Any of these effects, I think, in a hit point based action economy, I think that is probably a better way to go about dealing with cool effects than just saying, "Oh, that sounds a bit too nasty. I'm going to counterspell it," after the GM's already reached for their dice.
Yeah. And even set the scene, giving you some great flavor as to how this spell is going off, the effect it's having. The villain has monologued at length while they're casting it. It's like, but no, it's like it's the. I'm trying to think. I've spent a lot of time being as dismissive of this as possible in the past. I'll refer you back to that. Let's just pretend this didn't happen. So here it is. I'm very grateful to you, Warlord Scar, for giving me the final say, at least on this section of the episode. But we're reaching your you've got a kind of a Hydra for your final pick, right?
I had vaguely thought about having Levitate as my final option, but that's less about the spell itself.
Why not fly?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, now
Okay.
you're making me do a double header. Okay. Okay, so the problem with Levitate is that it's not fly, and people want it to be fly so bad. This is where you get, like, the lassoing wizards, where people are trying everything desperately, like gust of wind to blow myself along, like, with my levitation, or any other way to
This is why I packed a kite.
stop or start the laws of momentum to make me fly for second level rather than third level. And it's just a spell, which is a limited version of a more iconic spell that causes people to turn D&D into a farce in their desperate attempts to get ring efficiency out of their spell slots. And I just don't have a terribly high tolerance for that after, many years of gaming.
Someone tried to mix the physics with the magic.
Yeah, but that's less a real thing. It levitated more. Some people just really like the idea that they can get the equivalent of a fourth level spell out of a first level spell slot, and this tingles them far too much. And I don't. That's a personal bugbear. My actual final pick is for the eternal problem, folks. I know we promised about 7 years ago that we were going to do the fighters versus mages answer to Life Universe and everything.
We did it. It's a lost episode. We lost the recording for the second part. And we've never been able to actually remember what the hell we said.
Don't let them see behind the curtain, man.
It's an amazing episode. I mean, one of the all-time greats. It's just a shame no one will ever listen.
But my selection here is Forcecage, which is standing in for the linear fighter quadrat.
Oh, okay. We're having all of that conversation in this slot. Okay, but yes.
Okay. Forcecage, for those who don't know, is a spell that surrounds a single creature in a single square with indestructible force bars, so they can't leave that square unless they are like literally made of ooze or inches tall, or you can't just make it a glass bubble if you're worried about them like turning gas or something. And it's just no saving throw. It's just it targets the area around the person essentially, and once you're inside, there's no non-magical means of leaving, which means it is the perfect anti-fighter spell because it is a spell that says target fighter can't do anything else for the rest of combat unless they have a particularly potent set of magic items or their own wizard, takes the time out of their spell duel, the epic bad guy, to actually free them, assuming they have the correct spell, because force magic is all kinds of nonsense to actually get rid of. There are a lot of spells which are better at dealing with fighter types. That's fine. Reverse gravity is kind of mean for anyone who has to get close to you, hit you with a sword. There's a lot of buff spells, like they take half damage from swords, or whenever you hit me with a sword, you take damage, or whenever you hit me with a sword, you're teleported half a mile away. These are all mean things, and at high level, I'm okay with certain mean things, but stuff like Forcecage is just target player doesn't get to play. And that's just not good to have as a option for a villain or even for a lot of players to just oh man, okay, do you want me to do the third head here? Because
I think your point about it being especially martial class nullifying is good because, like, okay, it's got bars in it. There are gaps. So putting a wizard in there doesn't make any sense. They'll just cast through it.
yeah, it's perfectly see-through. You can just
Yeah, exactly that. But if I can't swing my sword, if I can't shoot my bow,
flick marvels through the bars.
yes, it's a real FU to the poor old linear fighter. You've just quadratic him.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, if you're a 13th level fighter, you could do horrible things in a single round to most wizards. That's not uh, that's not untrue, but it's the negation of action, I guess. It's much like the counterspell, except that this one will go on for multiple turns, and there's no saving throw. The only time I think a fighter has really had a chance against the likes of Forcecage was, I think, third edition epic level handbook gave strength DCs for smash your way through a wall of force. So, like, if you could get a 50 on your strength check, you could just smash this indestructible wall in half and charge on out. But that didn't come up as much as people thought.
Oh man, if the creature tries to use teleportation or interplanar travel to leave the cage, it must first make a charisma saving throw. Charisma, the pillar of fighters.
Once again, paladins are the way of the truth and the light.
True, true. On a success, they can use the magic to exit. On a failure, they can't exit the cage and waste use of spell or effect. Oh, and the cage also extends into the ethereal plane, blocking ethereal travel. You can't even unalive yourself to get out of this thing. And the spell can't be dispelled by dispel magic. Interesting. So there you go. Yeah, it's an absolute. Magic is essentially rewriting the rules, but there's got to be something between rewriting the rules and simply negating the rules altogether.
I mean, we've sort of implied it back and forth for this entire series. Is there's just an awful lot of stuff that was designed probably by players, by Gary Gygax's own players, where they took his terrible, terrible spell creation rules and researched their own spells in their wizard towers to make stuff. It's either they did it or because he needed content for the PHP, he might have just stolen some ideas of stuff they wanted and used that to make cool new spells. But the point is, D&D in the original time really leaned into this idea that there wasn't any difference between an NPC and a PC. That the barons and kings that were dotted around the land were just high level fighters, and all the wizards' towers were run by wizards just the same as you, because obviously all wizards want to have a tower in the middle of nowhere, and none of them ever want to be social.
Have you met COVID kids? I mean, there's a certain nobility to that as long as you're willing to engage in a very simulationist approach to the game. Like it suits a West Marches game. It suits a lot of games that were being played at that time.
Yeah, it suits the type of game that Gary Gygax himself played.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. And that's great. If you've got the time and the energy for it, knock yourself out. There's lots to be said for it. It is, and I think it embraces a PvP slash competitive atmosphere that is perhaps lost to the game today. But it's not the game we play. It's not the game, and it's not the game that the company are selling. And that's the probably the damning part of all this is that there's lots and lots of things that are just legacy stuff that they've left in there without any particular examination, without any real reflection as to why it's there or what its purpose is. They curate and steward it without really taking ownership for what it is and what it does. So, which kind of neatly brings me to my last choice, and this is my number one: get rid of, cut, cull, excise, expel forever from the game. And I don't know, how did you react when you saw this? Do you understand why I chose it?
I almost put Matt on the list as well. I'm glad you did.
Really? Oh my goodness. Great. Okay, so you probably have a good idea why. My number one pick for a cull is Hunter's Mark.
Yeah.
Scar, why do you think that might be?
Because you keep forgetting to cast it every goddamn round. And every single combat, you go 3 rounds in and say, oh, wait, I didn't cast Hunter's Mark. Damn.
Close. So, I mean, if you're casting it at all, it's probably because you are playing
A Ranger.
a ranger. And that's why I hate it. There is no other spell in the entire player's handbook. I mean, we could make an argument that Fireball it's totemic. It's a defining feature of the wizard class, but not to the extent that Hunter's Mark has become a defining feature of playing a ranger in D&D. And for the life of me, I can't understand why. It's not a great spell. It requires concentration, which I hate. It doesn't have huge damage output or potential. Upcasting it just makes it last longer for some reason. But for some reason, the people who write the classes have decided that this is the defining feature of Rangers. Presumably because they don't have the imagination to come up with anything else. And the reason I would want to excise it for all time is because, against all the odds, in the current 2024 edition, it has become even more important. It's been rewritten, but it's become central to, like, it's practically the only thing that really defines a ranger because they've cut away all of the other things: the exploration, the movement over terrain, the foraging for food, the direction sense, the ability to discern what's in the locale. All of that got cut away. But Hunter's Mark remains. And for the life of me, I can't imagine why they think this is an appealing feature for, like, it's not a class feature. I have to expend a spell slot to cast it. I have to expend concentration to cast it. And now I have to cast it to access other features of the ranger of the subclasses. Like, what is going on here? Why is the entire class hostage to one low level spell that isn't particularly good? And that's why I want rid of it. I think, like, if it was gone, it would force them to either drop Ranger and, I don't know, open up a slot for Artificer, which people love, or rewrite Ranger in a meaningful way that actually made it work, despite the fact that they might have to do something like, I don't know, write hex crawl adventures or put any thought into anything other than social interactions and going down dungeons. There are 3 pillars to this game, after all. I read it in a book somewhere. It came to me in a vision. I saw it in a dream. I heard it on the radio.
No argument there.
So that's my final choice. I love Ranger. I love Ranger. It has been so badly served for so long, and Hunter's Mark has been the millstone around Ranger's neck for at least 2 editions now. And for life, I cannot understand why anybody thinks that is the defining feature of Rangers. Boils my beer, my blood, my piss, any liquid within the local 5 foot square. Okay, I'm all done now. I think, and this, folks, we just don't have it in us to be this negative all the time. I think that might be why we're actually ending this series. It's the real core, the reason.
I do think we probably have an episode in how to make Rangers good, maybe.
Yes, but give me a second. I'll give you the name of the YouTuber who's already done it and done it better. Give me a moment to find this guy. It won't surprise you to learn that he has beard and glasses. Who knew? But if I can just drag this chap up from my burgeoning stream of YouTube content, I'll find a delaying. We might just cut all of this. Okay, so any final thoughts?
If I ever become a proper game designer, I would take an axe to most of the spell systems that I see. There's a whole bunch of assumptions in D&D's spell lists that do not bear out in actual D&D play, and it would be better for the game mechanically if they sort them out, but they are terrified of accidentally leaving something iconic on the table because they're afraid of having another fourth egg. And man, I feel like in the Pathfinder second ed environment, I think people are starting to realize, maybe actually fourth ed had some better ideas than we should have thought of. But anyway.
Oh, is this the fourth ed resurgence?
I don't know. I feel like it's slow burning. It's not a big revelation, but I am starting to get the feeling like low level people are maybe thinking about it again. Certainly, I've seen more people like trying it out again in the edition change word. Maybe just like how third ed caused the OSR, 2024 ed will start the fourth ed revival.
And fourth ed caused Pathfinder.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've come to a place where I think a lot of people are like, I don't know if this is for me. What else is there? Bob World Builder is the guy you want to look for, who, honest to goodness, seems to, like a good ranger, makes most of the videos in the woods. And he has talked extensively about what you could do with ranger, what ranger is as a class, because it's somewhat ill-defined. And I have to say, I agree wholeheartedly with most of what he says. He does not need our endorsement. He has significantly more subscribers or viewers than we do. But I can't help but just agree with the guy. I think he has a handle on what rangers need. So yeah, we'll leave it there. I'll just say Bob the World Builder has probably covered anything we'd say about Ranger at this point, although I would dearly love to say it myself. Okay, so Scar, I think this is the first multi-episode long format series we've taken on that we have had to admit defeat on.
It's a big problem, and I can understand why people in Seattle might struggle with it themselves. I don't begrudge them, but I just say, man, so many bits that just seem so skippable, callable even.
like some of this series. But we're bringing it to an end now. That just means we're freeing up bandwidth for something else.
If you'd like to give us ideas for another 37-part series, you can head us up to our social media or come to our Discord and give us all your great ideas. We'll credit you, honest.
Oh, 100%. Always. We love the participation from the audience, and we're not proud people. It is much better, I think, to champion an idea and say where it came from than attempt to sort of erect an edifice around it and claim it as your own. But no, we don't do that. We don't finish that way. We just finish. Sometimes we just leave. Sometimes we have to turn our attentions elsewhere. Sometimes there's been enough culling. But until next time, thank you for joining us for this one. Thank you for sticking with us as far as we did go. If you do come to our Discord, bring your number one. I'd love to see this spell gone. From, well, current or 2014 5th Ed, if you like, if we want to do historical period stuff. Or show up with a new conversation. Tell us if you've had a chance to look at the PHB. Is there something in there that you're like, okay, this is a problem from the get-go? And yes, I know conjure minor elementals is a massive problem right now.
Don't worry, they have a fully integrated walled garden system to fix that.
we errata is dropping in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what we bring up next week. But for now, I guess we're done culling.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike from Version 3 license.